We're going to go over the cold water community pretty quickly. There's just a ton of information in here. We have our 48-page paper that you can read if you want more details into all this. But this is what it looked like. 2023, our membership has changed a little bit. We've had some folks move on. We've had some folks come in and help out towards the end here. But Tom McDougall is our co-chair out of Ontario. And just tons of people help us as well as we do our modeling and we do our presentations and get our information from USGS and all the work that they do across the lake and everyone else. We couldn't do what we do without them. So what we're going to take a dive into today and look at is our lake whitefish populations, which is one of our intensively managed populations, and then lake trout, which is in the process of rehabilitation, steelhead, which is big business for everybody here, and then take a look at our burbot and cisco populations. So our cold water assessment happens in the month of August. We typically had 5 nets that we set around the thermocline, which we refer to as our status 1 nets. Those status 1 nets are now 2 nets, one on the thermocline and one 10 foot or a mile away from that. And you can see those ringing the outside edge of the blue area, which is set right in touch with the thermocline. And then we switched a couple years ago to offshore nets, which are the blue dots you see out in the lake. So with those new offshore nets, we're able to really take a look at the entire cold water fish community and find some things that we haven't seen in a long time, and really start to get a true assessment of the cold water fishery. And then you'll see the red stars or the partnership data that we're able to tap into, and they do it's through commercial fishing, and that's September and October timeframe for those. So we sample August, September, and October looking at the cold water community. So one of the things that we've noticed in putting together all this information is that we have a very, very patchy distribution of our cold water community. So if you look in the top left-hand graph, that's lake whitefish, and we find a lot of our lake whitefish are in and around the thermocline area. But then in the top right, you see that the lake trout distribution is also patchy, but further to the east. And then in the bottom, we have our burbot population, and those fish are concentrated more to the western portion of the central basin. So this patchy distribution and the use of space is really quite fascinating and interesting. And if you look at the lake trout abundance in those dots in the top right, you'll notice that most of those fish are in those cold water nets. So these were fish that we never assessed before with the way the old management plan was. So we're really starting to get access to the true population of these lake trout and some older fish, some really, really nice older fish. So looking at lake whitefish, the population remains stable, but it is still a bycatch fishery. Ontario has lowered the quota to the point where they don't fish for them commercially, just strictly through bycatch. So you see their catch rates have gone down. Ohio's have maintained pretty similar. So although low for the time series, it's still very stable. This is the distribution of harvest throughout the lake. We have a 5-minute grid on the north shore in Ontario waters and a 10-minute grid on the south shore. And the majority of the harvest happens in the western basin, typically during the spawn in the fall of the year. So with a large conglomerate coming there, in and around the Sandusky, Maumee area. There was 204,000 pounds of lake whitefish harvested last year, and as we look at this estimated abundance with statistical catch at age, we saw a lot of young of the year last year. So if you look at the very far projection for 2026, you'll see that 3-year-old year class makes up a good portion of the fishery and the biomass in 2023. But again, very stable, but looking promising as we project into the future. So we established a limit reference point for spawner stock biomass between the period of 2014 and 17 when the population was at its highest. And as we go through the time series here in 2023 and project it out, we still maintain spawner stock biomass above the limit reference point. We had a decline this year after 2 exceptional years in our cold water assessment for CPUE. But still, again, very, very close to the long time, or the last 6 or 7 years in the time series. 21 and 22 were exceptional, and then that 23-year class was a lot of young of the year, which was seen in the trawl fishery or in our trawl catches and not in our cold water assessment. So for whitefish or lake whitefish, very conservative harvest. There's 204,000 pounds in 2023. A lot of younger year classes present, which is exciting which is promising for the future. And the population currently is moderate, but getting better. Indicators vary, but still showing very positive movement into the future. So looking at lake trout, the new management plan for lake trout went into effect in 2021 and goes through 2030. And one of the things we looked at was, or that was in the management plan, was consistency, lamprey control, and stock strains that make the most benefit or make the most difference to the fishery, and then maintain an annual stocking to support and achieve the adult lake trout target. So we're looking for 2 fish per lift, 5 years or older, and up to, or at minimum, 10-year classes present. So from the cold water assessment, or from stocking this year, this is the very first time in the management plan that we have achieved the 280,000 stocking threshold, which was set in the management plan, with 120,000 of those roughly going into Pennsylvania waters, 80,000 in the Nanticoke Shoal off Ontario, and 80,000 into the Dunkirk Deep stocking. And we, for those of you that aren't aware, in the lake trout management plan, we have switched to pulse stocking to try and move fish around and inundate some areas and continue to maintain stocking in other areas to try to promote the fishery and try to really help the spawning stock biomass move forward. So as we look at the age 5 lake trout abundance, or 5+ lake trout abundance, you can see we were just below the 2 fish per lift threshold at 1.91, but with the 95% confidence interval around the mean, we're still well within our range for the management plan. So as of recent, in the last 2 years, we have switched to those Lake Champlain and the Finger Lake strain lake trout, and this is the reason why. The Slate Island do very, very well at young ages, but they get cropped off, and we don't see them past age 7. So knowing that we need to get these fish into the older year classes for spawning success, which is why we switched to the Finger Lakes and the Lake Champlain, because those are the fish that seem to make it into those older ages. But we met the requirement. We have greater than 10-year classes, and we have a really good number of fish in that younger year class, as well as a lot of older fish. So we take a look at natural reproduction, and natural reproduction is based on the lake trout that are stocked into Lake Erie are adipose clipped and coated wire tagged. Now, there's a certain percentage of those that gets missed. There's whether it's through adipose clip or through coated wire tag, and then you can figure out the fraction of those that get missed by both. And when we encounter fish in the cold water assessment that have both an adipose fin and no coated wire tag, we're able to take a look at those and figure out which ones are naturally reproduced. So we're still above the long-term average since 2000, with a slight downtick this year, but still trending in the right direction, certainly. So our stocking goals and age class targets were met this year for lake trout. Our adult abundance is on target. We're using all the data now instead of just those tier 1 or status 1 nets from the thermocline. We're using all the nets, including the deep water sets. And the 2023 had a higher distribution of lake trout in the eastern portion of the eastern basin. So moving on to rainbow trout and steelhead. We continue to maintain stocking at a very similar level for the last 20-25 years. 1.783 million steelhead smolt were stocked into Lake Erie this year in various areas, but this population is completely maintained by stocking. The primary sustainability of it is through stocking. So this is the proportion of where they were stocked, with 57.7% of the fish being stocked in Pennsylvania waters, and then Ohio, New York, and Ontario, Michigan filling in the rest. So we had no creel surveys this year. The information from the past creel surveys, as well as interviews with anglers this year, tell us that fishing rates are still real good. Everything is still at a level that we're happy with. Ohio currently has a creel survey going on, fall of 23, spring of 24, that we'll report on next year, as well as New York's creel survey will be coming up, and Pennsylvania is scheduling a creel survey as well. So a lot of this will be updated in years to come with new creel survey information. But as of the last creel survey information, it was somewhere in the 0.6 fish per hour, which is exceptional. So looking at burbot, again, much like whitefish, historically declining, yet still stable. We saw an increase in Ontario waters this year, which was that patchy distribution off of the west side of Long Point. But then we saw a decline in the partnership CPE. So it's all over the place, but stable. Low, but stable is the takeaway from this. But one of the positive outlooks for burbot is in 2013, this graph was significantly different. Most of our fish were in that 12 to 15-year-old range. A very, very old population with a lot of issues, surrounding burbot, surrounding reproductive success, and issues from a fish health standpoint. And now, here we are 11 years later, and we have a very young population. A lot of these fish are 2 and 3 years old. And the number of individuals is, on the y-axis is 40, 45 fish. So it's much different. The picture is much different this year than it was just 10 years ago. So we're very pleased with that. It's trending in the right direction. These young fish have a great chance of really contributing to the fishery well into the future. So again, like whitefish, populations are low but stable. Recruitment seems good with this younger population that we've been observing. And again, that patchy distribution into the western portion of the coldwater assessment, really is what drove, where these numbers came from. All the fish were off that Long Point area caught, in Ontario waters. So Cisco always is of interest. It's a fish that we're doing a lot of research on, doing a lot of, gathering a lot of information. We continue to get fish in the system. We continue to encounter them, whether it's through commercial fishing catches or in our assessment catches. But all those fish tend back to the genetics of Lake Huron fish. They all appear to be bloater. We don't see any remnants of any of those fish from the original Lake Erie strain. So we continue to have observations of these fish in Lake Erie, although rather rare. And again, all of them typically coming from the upper lakes. So there's tons and tons of Cisco research going on right now. We're looking at the use of oxythermal habitat. We've got fish tagged with telemetry tags in Lake Erie and observing their use of Lake Erie and the oxythermal zones within Lake Erie and how that fits into the other populations and the dynamics of Lake Erie. But just a lot of research going on currently. We're looking at an experimental introduction in 2025 in New York waters to start stocking Cisco's back into Lake Erie. So it's a very interesting tale that certainly people could talk about for days and days, but in the appreciation of time, there's a ton going on with Cisco's currently. So we still have individuals showing up. They all seem to be linked to the upper lakes. Our research continues, looking at their use of Lake Erie and all the oxythermal habitat. And then with that stocking projected for 2025 for New York, the future looks bright for Cisco. So we'll see how that all goes. But the picture on the right, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but there's a lake in Pennsylvania where they found a remnant population of of what has appeared to be genetically tested Lake Erie's strain of Cisco. And you look at the top picture, that was fish from the 1950s. And then the bottom picture right below it is a picture from Clear Lake just a few years ago. So very, very similar morphology. So with that being said, again, there's tons of information. The report is 48 pages long. So if any of you would like a deeper dive into the coldwater community and what 2023 looked like, you can access the report. It is on the website, and you can find all this information there. So thank you.